Boom. Good to see everybody. I'm gonna get right to it because we have a lot to get into, and I want to give you guys a chance to ask questions. And because I have a class right after this, I will have to end on time, so I'm gonna jump on in. And I took notes, which is why I'm looking off to the side to rein myself in. I want to talk about 3 points for like getting a fuller, richer, bigger voice without having to compromise like beauty or freedom. 'Cause sometimes people get a bigness that is like, you've heard me talk about it before. I actually think she's a brilliant artist, but Alicia Keys, publicly, objectively, I mean, it's irrefutably, there have been famous occasions in which she's cracked while performing live. Her voice is big and rich. She's a low voice type by air approach standards, female voice. Um, she's got a thick, rich voice. I think her actual voice, her actual instrument is phenomenal, but she tends to use it in a way that creates like a kind of a weight that makes her voice brittle, which is why she tends to crack a lot live. And she's had a publicly a lot of vocal issues where I know at one point she was constantly getting like cortisone shots and like getting like to make it through, like this was years ago. Um, and I know she had to have a vocal coach come out like as an emergency like halfway through a tour a few years ago. And this is all stuff you can Google and whatever. It's not like hearsay or anything. But my point is, it's a kind of bigness that is not only like unpalatable, but it's unhealthy. And so like people like what they like. I feel like if you can get people coming to your shows with your voice, you win. You know what I mean? If you have, all you need is to find your tribe. But health, my thing is, if you don't have any voice at all, then you can't do much of anything. So we want to make sure that we have a voice. So when it comes to healthy bigness of a voice, the first thing I want to point out, and this is going to lead to our little warm up today, um, and this is worth jotting down, or like if you reference this again later in the making a timestamp note or something. But typically, flow dominance, higher flow will lead to a thinner sound. You know, na na no. I'm always doing a little Ariana Grande impersonation. If it's if it's I've been doing this a lot lately from, I can't remember the name of the band, but one of my students, shout out to Radhika, is was working on this song. Do you see what you've done to me? Gone and washed away my misery. If I let myself have a lot of flow, meaning I allow myself to deflate more, then in order for that to be healthy and free, I have to allow for a more heady coordination. It's not right or wrong, it's just what it is. Do you see what you've done to me? The less you want to engage the body's openness, you're gonna have to let it get lighter if you want it to remain healthy. Can you make it the sound big with a collapsing body? You can. I would not recommend it. You know? That's how, an example of that happening is Whitney Houston when she was young. Practically flawless sound of her voice, but had her early career was marred by a lot of vocal health issues. I mean, independent of all the drug stuff that came later, she was constantly singing with this huge sound on a collapsing body, and it led to her having a lot of vocal issues. There is, if I can remember to post it, there's this really great podcast where her voice teacher, Dr. William Riley, talks about the experience of working with her, and also Celine Dion. Yeah, so by coordination, you mean ribcage open, magic point? Yes. So if I were to not do that, if I were to not have my magic point engaged, not have my ribcage open, not have, if I were to just, then, I would let it be lighter. If I do that and still try to sing big, the bigness would have to come from, well, let me be clear. All bigness of voice is the result of muscular tension. And there is healthy tension and there is unhealthy tension. So there will be tension. You're not going to get a big sound with no tension. That's why I often cringe when people talk about effortless singing. There can be healthy effort. What's the word? Like there can be like kind of revitalizing effort, versus like destructive effort, but there will be effort. When people say effortless, they almost always mean an effort that they're used to, which is throat tension. So whenever I have a student saying, I sing effortlessly, I feel like my heart is stuck like, okay, okay. Is the effortlessness in the room with us now? Like, where is? Yeah, so they're just really used to squeezing here. So if I want to go from, do you see what you've done? Do you see what you've done to me? If I want it bigger in a way that is sustainable and I can still talk afterward, um, then I need to have resistance. So you can think of it this way. I'm going to be reductive, but I want to give you stuff you could really use. There's so much nuance. There's so much nuance and gray area to all this stuff. But to be basic, to give you something you can keep, essentially, our first kind of concept for today, I'm going to give you three things to think about today. The first one is the bigger you want your voice to be, the more you've got to resist that outflow of breath. Another way to think of it is the more you want to resist collapse. Do you see what you've done to me? Versus, do you see what you've done to me? Same thing with classical singing. You know, you know, so it depends on what you want to. I would never sing that way, but just to make the point. So if you want to scream, or if you want to yell, or if you want to belt, you have to resist more if you want it to be really big. And you can affect how much resistance you give it. Because just if you want your voice to be thicker, like that's appropriate to me. I don't want I can, but if you understand what the song Shlumetan is, what that song cycle is about, it's just stylistically, emotionally inappropriate. So I would give some resistance, but I wouldn't use everything. But you might have a song. I just saw a clip on TikTok. Well, rest in peace or whatever. I don't know what's gonna happen with that, but hopefully we get to. But anyway, I saw a clip on TikTok of Lady Gaga singing. I can hardly wake up, but the show must go on. And she's like doing this really kind of screamy belt. It's really excellent. And she's really open. It's so healthily done and so beautifully done. Like she's freaking killing it. I don't know if you've seen the clip I'm talking about, but she's always wearing something kind of wild. But she's wearing like this big, like looks like a, I don't know what you call it, like the ballerina material, but like this big kind of skirt, and and it's like dark and it's like backlit, but it's really amazing. But she's so open. And it's so protected. And I think I've referenced Christina Aguilera a lot as well, just for mainstreaminess sake, how over singing being whatever, taste level, we all have different taste levels, but the point is, when you hear her sing, I think of the recent clip of her singing with Sabrina Carpenter a lot, and how like resonant her voice was and how explosively powerful. And like, regardless of how she chooses to use it artistically, for her to sing this big and still have so much voice all these years later, she's doing something right, So that kind of healthy, reliable bigness of the voice comes in part from finding your magic point, like Angel referenced. We want to find the tension point, and we're going to work this together because I don't want to just lecture to you. I mentioned last time that you don't have to sing with active support, because you don't. Just know that if you want to maintain your health to the degree that you want to soften your body and collapse, you're going to have three little birds out on the window. And he told me I don't need to worry. I wouldn't worry about you hurting your voice this way, but you would kind of have to live there. I personally don't like being trapped. Now, sometimes on a lazy day, I posted videos of me singing this way, whether teaching or performing. Just if I'm having a day where I'm like, look, I'm tired. Look, I'm human. But generally, I like some degree of active support for myself, because it gives me more options, and I like to throw my voice around like a madman. So I like to not be stuck. I want to be able to move freely. If I want to do a classical aria 1 second or a rock scream another, I don't want to be trapped. And so I don't mind that extra effort for the payoff of the freedom. So but with that being said, I want everybody, and we're going to exercise together too, but this is kind of a warm up for us. Your magic points, the concept of a magic point means very specific things to specific people. There's the Marjorie Montel magic point, and like the exact, like literally a point that she believed. And like, if you've done those lessons with me, I'll make sure to put it in the in the caption later on when I post the recording of this video, but I have a whole section on Magic Point on Patreon that you like a whole collection of material, and I talk about historically what I think it is, because I think that what happened was Marjorie was noticing just a reality of the human body that we all have a solar plexus or a celiac plexus, this bundle, this nerve-rich neural plexus here, and where we feel the apex, the zenith, the peak of that tends to feel like pointy, like there's a point. Like for me, I feel it more toward the top of my triangle, like here. Marjorie felt it a little more to the right or the left, I forget which one it was. But some people feel it dead in the center, some people feel more into the, so as long as it's within the zone, you might notice like a place. But another concept of Magic Point that I like is your wings, is using them. If you can open, I've done posts on that too, about how if you can open the rib cage independently of the breath, you are guaranteed to be a great singer. That's a commonly used express sentiment in the old worlds of like bel canto and opera singers and stuff like that. But this idea that you can open your rib cage independently of singing. I found the lat approach to be way more protective for the voice than any other kind of support. And I'm going to take you guys on a tour real quick. We've done this before in our support class, so I'm going to do like a quick review, but I want you to know the full picture. So the lats, the wings, you kind of feel them flare out from the sides of your back. If you want to feel where I'm talking about, if you make an F sound as in fun or fantastic and keep your throat relaxed, you'll typically feel your back muscles kind of flex reflexively. That's kind of where you want to aim. Or if you sniff in short sniffs, at the peak of your fullness, you're probably going to feel like an increased tone in that part of you. So these are just ways, I mean, you can spend weeks or even months just exploring the breathing part of it, using F, sniffs, ocean breaths, to just find and strengthen those muscles. You may not be at a place, because all of you are at different skill levels. Some of you I know very well and I know you can do this. Some of you are just starting, and that's perfectly fine. So it's okay to do breath work to stimulate it, but eventually you want to reach a point in which you can open independently of the breath, and I'm doing this just to show that I'm not breathing to do this, I'm working my muscles. Oh, that's a weird feeling though, so I'm going to stop. So yeah, but we're opening independently of the breath, and you don't have to open with all your might, just like I can hold this cup, or I can hold this cup, but you just need to hold the cup. You know what I mean? You don't have to, you don't have to do all that. So I can open deliberately. It doesn't have to be brutal. I don't have to use every muscle in my body. I'm just opening up. And so a common thing we see is, I'm open. It's like, okay, Daniel, all right. I need you to calm on. I want you to take it down a notch. All right, yeah. So deliberate doesn't have to mean brutal. It just means intentional. It could be precise even, but it doesn't have to be like exorbitantly, stressful to the body. But with that being said, I want to point this out to you again as a concept, and you can play with this as I talk. We're gonna S. So a good way to test your Magic Point is if you're full, and comfortably full, you don't have to fill up to the brim, but if you have a full breath and you S, at your tension point, can you stay open? So my belly came in, but my ribs are still big. Until I don't want them to be anymore, and then I turn off. So a similar thing would be belly comes in, but my solar plexus is staying out. So that's staying open. Another thing would be you can push out from the obliques. I don't teach this one as much, but in the Estill method and in some other methodologies, they push out from the obliques at the onset of tone. So that's one that can work. I have seen it work. It doesn't work that well for me, but depending on you and your unique body, I sometimes jokingly say this, but I also kind of mean it. One thing that I think makes me better than a lot of voice teachers is that I hold space for the fact that people be different, and I try to be open about my personal biases, but also I encourage you to hold space for the fact that you're not me. And I mean that in the best of ways. You have your own unique gifts and quirks and stuff. And I do think there's a lot of scientific merit for flexing open from the lats, and that might be your thing. But also, I know some phenomenal singers who da 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 who open at this oblique area. There's like a push out from there. It's just they sound amazing. I know some of them personally, and they be killing it. It doesn't work that well for me, but that doesn't mean that it's not worthy of being experimented with. And so, but again, the test remains the same. Can you? When we talk about a magic point concept, we mean, or the concept of apoyo. Can you stay open? So that's the fortification of that openness from wherever. And there's also, I know my friend Trina Bordet used to hate when I would reference this, but you can push your belly forward. Again, it's not my favorite, but I know some singers who are phenomenal doing that. I don't, it's the last thing I recommend, but if you can do it, if it works for you, then it works for you. The only one I flat out don't recommend at all ever is that there are some people who teach a bearing down of the pelvic floor. Please don't ever do that. I've seen it cause a lot of problems. I've had a lot of students who were taught that by other teachers, and they literally have to get like special rehabilitation, men and women, because they've messed up like, and I don't want anybody to feel called out because some of them are on the Patreon, but it messes with you when you're constantly working your pelvic floor in that violent way. It can cause a lot of problems, and you can use your imagination. And so we don't bear down. The pelvic floor is allowed to work, but we don't shove into it. That's not a thing that we ever do. In case you're wondering this, but it made my voice sound better. Anytime you increase your intrathoracic pressure or intra-abdominal pressure, your voice will get bigger. But is it better? That's another thing. So let's refine this a bit. Well, first, any questions about the general concept? This class isn't so much about how to support. I want to get into some other concepts because I have other classes that go deeper into it. But any questions about the general concept of like finding a point of tension? Sorry, Zoe, did you raise your hand? Did I see that out the corner of my eye? Okay, just checking. Okay, cool. So we'll continue then. Mm, you want to test with the S, meaning can you, for the most part, you don't have to empty every drop of air, but for the most part, can you empty while keeping the point, the magic point, or the point d'appui, like the point of tension, the fulcrum, the point of operation, can you keep that point open as the rest of you deflates? It does, again, it doesn't have to be every last drop, but for the most part, can you keep open? If you get this, that's not it. If you get this, that's not it. If you get this, that's not it. So wherever you're working from, you should be able to keep it open for at least 80% of that breath. If you get this, that's not it. You want to be able to keep the thing open from wherever you're working from. Also, a common trap I've seen over the past 25 years, don't just choose the thing that's easiest to do right now. Choose the thing that frees your voice the most. For example, a lot of people are just weak in their lats. It doesn't mean you shouldn't use your lats. You might have weak obliques. It doesn't mean you should not use your obliques. It just might mean that you need to get some strength there. A better guide for what's working best for you in terms of like the solar plexus, the belly, whatever, is how does your voice feel? So if you slide, a good point d'appui, a good magic point, a good point of support, a good tension point should make your voice feel like it's easier to blend. Even if the actual physical act of supporting is a challenge, it should make it, I'm going from this voice up to this voice and then back down. And that feels really easy. It should also make you feel throatless. It should make you feel like, oh, I'm not really fighting for this. I feel like the voice can just come out. Even if you can only hold it for a little while. If anybody's familiar with the anime like Demon Slayer, it's like total concentration breathing. The character struggles for a while to do. He finally gets it, and then there's this young. Well, I think she's like really older than she looks, but she looks like a young girl. She's like, I do it all the time, even when I'm sleeping. He's like, what? And so he has to practice to get to the point where he can do it all the time. For the people who get it will get it. But the point is this: it's a skill. So it's not a thing where you just get it now and master it now because you're smart or because you're talented. There's actual muscle strength that needs to be developed. And I tell people explicitly, I think it takes a good 6 months to reach your full strength with any particular, and that's with the consideration that you're actually doing it a little bit every day and actually practicing all the time, just to literally build the full strength. Because sometimes when I work with artists who have trained and stuff, a lot of it is just a lack of like conditioning. And there's this pervasive belief that I know it, I know it, I know it, I know it. And I beg you guys to hear me that there's no amount of knowing that can replace the doing. Like you got to do it. It's like fitness. You can't just know it. You got to really do it. So I think you present have heard me rant about that enough where you'll get it. So I'll leave you alone with that. But you've got to build the strength. And so, if you've worked with me one on one, sometimes you'll say, "Oh, I can't do that note. I can't do this." I'm like, "You're not doing anything wrong. You just need to do this thing more. You just need to do it more and build the strength." So, yeah. With that being said, we're going to move on. The second part is sealing the valve. Oh, is there a warm up or audio suggestion? Um, okay. So that's a good question because I kind of feel like almost everything lends itself to that. I'm thinking about well, part of why I'm doing these breathing gym classes is to help with that. I think a general daily breathwork routine will help for any one of these types of support. And I think that I kind of emphasized that less in recent years than I did when I first started, mainly because not any of you specifically, but because people were so whiny and complaining about having to do extra work. And so I'm like, but I just want to just do it now. And I found myself going against vocal coaches like, you don't need to do all that stuff. Just do, and you can get it. And people were like, oh, this guy's easier. I'm like, all right, well, I guess people don't want to, not to sound like a Kardashian, people don't want to work anymore. But yeah, but I was going to say this. If you're serious about taking your skill to the next level in a long lasting way, you want to have a daily breathwork practice. And you can just reference the breathing gym class for that. Like I said, just do something every day. Because I find that if you're generally strong, and I don't mean gym fitness. I mean, if you want to go, I mean, do what you do, like run, do whatever. But I think for those of you who either watched the video, I think this was on the recording, I can't remember, but those of you who were there in our last New York class, Leora talked about how as a runner, one of our students, Stephen, was like, well, certainly the fitness made you a better breather. And she was like, actually, no. I think the way I was breathing actually kind of hurt me, actually. So just doing athletic feats, and she wasn't saying that she's an anti-running. She runs all the time. She's very passionate. She's really good at it. She's passionate about it. But her point was, just exercising with no mindfulness of the breath is not going to automatically yield improved breathing. So we both have clients who are literally Olympic medal winning athletes who told us, oh wow, I don't think I was breathing well before. That you can't be more fit conventionally than these people working out hours on end every day, but you can work in a way that's very tight and constrictive or constricting, or you can really work the muscles and the tissues and the mechanisms of deep breathing. So that's a long-winded response to say, I think doing the daily breath work stuff is going to be really critically important to building the strength. And also the feeling, anything that triggers reflexive response, like any kind of SOVTE, so yeah, any of that. You stated when you should out to try to keep your lats open. Can you explain? Yeah, so I'm using an S as in Saturday, not an SH as in should, just to be clear. Although you could use should. But the test is, can I resist? Because what normal humans want to do who aren't rich vocal people like we are, they will go, because that's what normal humans do. But what weirdos like us do, I am deflating, breath is leaving, but I'm staying open. And that's the skill. Or if I wanted to use the one I'm kind of, well, let me use my other stronger one. This is like my number 2. So if so again, my belly button comes in, but I'm not doing this. I'm not deflating. Okay. Nor am I puffing my chest out. It's the muscle. So you want your waist, well, not even your whole waist if you're using your obliques. You want to feel an in and up from within. Even if you're pushing your belly out, there's still a feeling of an in and up that you can feel, I promise you.
Sorry, just a quick question, real quick.
Yeah.
You're not referring this to the breath cycle. This is something totally different, right? The breath cycling, like we've been doing, like you did last class.
This is just it. Well, actually, it is kind of like the breath cycle in that it's just the test is on the exhale of the breath cycle. Can you stay open? So this is just a very specific test of can you suspend. So we can breathe in ways like if I'm just warming up, there's an open and close. But when I'm ready to test my actual support,
Okay, okay,
yeah.
okay.
So, there are times when we just kind of open and close if you're just warming up or doing a certain exercise. But specifically, when we're trying to test our ability to support, to ground ourselves, to find strength for the voice, that's a different thing. So, is there an amount of time one should do this type of, yeah, yeah, I think that I can't, there's no official amount of time per se, but I do think it can take a good, I would give it at least a good 3 months of exploration. If you, and I know all of you are not starting from scratch here, some of you I've worked with one-on-one and you have more familiarity, but if you're starting from like zero, I wouldn't, I kind of consider it almost like dating. I wouldn't marry any particular technique right away. Like date around, get to find out what you like, who you like, what your relationship is, and different things. And so, and then make your decision. I wouldn't just rush right on into, I'm not trying to put you in an arranged marriage here. I want you to figure out who you like. And even though I would like for you to settle with a nice set of lats, no, I'm saying, but you explore the different things and you see for yourself, and you might yeah, you might kind of vacillate a bit. You might not be entirely sure right away, and that's okay. But again, the number one thing I find is don't choose the one that's easiest to do. Choose the one that gives you the most vocal benefit. So, for example, pushing your belly out. Maybe that's really hard for you to do, but if it may, but it, maybe you could only hold the note for like 5 seconds. But if in those 5 seconds your throat felt like it disappeared and your voice was full and it felt protected, that might be something worth exploring, as opposed to, I find that people often think, oh, I like my solar plexus. Like, do you like it? Or is it just that it's literally easier for you to control than the other places? Because that's not the same, that doesn't necessarily mean it's the best, you know. Yeah. Like, do you really love him? Or do you just like that he just does whatever you say? So like, is that is it really a healthy relationship? Like, no, I don't really, yeah. So you want to really see, who's gonna be best. As I like work that whole like analogy to death. So anyway, metaphor. So yeah, but it can take months of exploration. But if you're really attuned to your body, figuring out which place you like most can happen pretty quickly. Uh, but the strengthening is going to take months regardless, no matter which one you choose, because that's just how humans work. Unless you are randomly strong in a certain part, where some people are. I've had clients who are swimmers and they have randomly strong lats, or people who play wind instruments and they have randomly strong, respiratory muscles. So every now and then I'll find somebody who's randomly strong in these unusual ways. But for the most part, it can take a while. Is it possible to overdo the resistance of airflow to the point where, yes, and that's kind of what we're gonna talk about that as well. It's very possible to overdo the resistance of airflow, and it is very possible to throw the body out of balance. And I think that, in fact, I think part of the reason why a lot of vocal coaches, some whom I know personally, really hate the concept of support is because overdoing it is kind of the norm. So, but there are some ways that I think you can easily vaccinate yourself against that, and we're going to talk about that a little bit too. But in fact, I'll throw this at you right away. I just finished a lesson with a professional student who we were just talking about this. Straw in a cup of water, but with some active use. The bubbles don't lie, and normally I, I blew a lot of water out. Some of you already know when I do my demonstration, I show like overdoing it, so it should really have more water than this. But if you're getting this, um, that means you're too restricted if the bubbles are starting and stopping. And if you're getting if you want sound to come out of your voice but no sound comes out, that also means you're too tight. So, but if you're going, so if the bubbles are stopping, or if the tone has stopped, you're too tight. Conversely, that means too much breath is releasing and you're not resisting enough. So we want bubbles that are small in height and steady in flow. That's healthy compression. The depth matters. Being closer toward the bottom is harder. Closer toward the top is easier. Think smartly. Don't let your ego sabotage this. Don't rush to the bottom to prove something. Start at the top and gradually work your way down. You want to feel a challenge, You don't want to feel pain or distress. The other thing is, I don't like doing this in water bottles. I know a lot of people say, I got the Mr. Box thing. Water bottles let you lie to yourself and let you believe that you have more control than you do because it contains it. Whenever I rehab Broadway singers, especially because support is such a big thing, they always think they have better support than they do because they do this inside of a water bottle, inside of the Dr. Box thing, and it's just bubble splashing everywhere, but they don't get to feel the splash. When I challenge them, because normally for them I would fill this up closer to toward the top, when I challenge them to keep the bubble small and steady, they go, oh, like, yeah. So you were getting some benefit from the resistance itself, but you weren't actually refining anything. And so we always end up getting to the next level with that. So it will help you to see it. If you don't have a strong cup of water handy, notice I'm still open. This would be bad. That's wrong. Also, this would be wrong. And I see that a lot. Where yes, my ribs are open, but now it's not free. And so you gotta be able to acknowledge we want like a juicy, supple trill, which sounds funny to say, but there should be a suppleness to it. It shouldn't be like a battering ram, or even if you do with your, it shouldn't be that. So it shouldn't be like a violent explosion. Now, if you're just starting, give yourself some grace. I'm not saying like it has to be perfect right away. Just don't settle for that long term. You should be striving for, and if you're more advanced, a really good way to work power and fullness with the trill, if you're on the advanced side of things, if you already know what your magic spot is, if you already get the gist of this, so we're essentially we're working dynamics with the trill, but I think the trill keeps you honest. Ironically, the way back is way harder than than the crescendo, and so it's going to really challenge you to stay nice and strong but supple. Because I find that when people do messa di voce, which I'm certainly not the only person who teaches this, they tend to pinch, even my opera students. And when we do it through a trill, they're like, oh, okay, because it'll stop a lot. So it's a good way to keep juicy. And if you're just starting, just rev the engine first. You can kind of pulse it to start. Okay, and I think, yeah. So these are ways to balance it. Also, in the recent audio I put out, I do a lot of high flow challenges. To challenge you to stay resisted here, but ha 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 ha. Make sure there's still flow. And I'll give you one more example. I'm not gonna say your name, don't worry. But I was working with a student a few days ago. I want some of your brown sugar, sugar. And he was open, but I want some of your brown. It was really tight because he was open, like from what we could see, but he started bearing down at the abs. Really make sure that whatever your magic point is, that you're actually working from that point and not just superficially appearing to. I find that with almost every type of support, people have a propensity toward just engaging the abs and like shoving the solar plexus up fakely, but this, like shoving it from the abs and making it look like they're doing this, or like opening the rib cage, but like from the abs, or like they'll overly push or lock this, and it'll look like they're doing the right thing, but they're not. So if you're opening the lats, you don't just want to look like how I look. You've got to really put your mind in the muscle. You've got to really bring yourself to that place, to that place, to that place. You don't just want to fake the look of it. You want to really feel the muscle. You have to, and that's again why I think the breathing gym classes are so important, because I want to make this really clear. If you're struggling to feel these things, please take heart. It's not a matter of your intelligence or your talent or even your work ethic. Most people are sensation blind because part of atrophy and part of muscle weakness is that the nerve endings literally function less effectively, and you literally can't feel the part of your body that will. I've told some of you the story in the past of I have a girlfriend from high school who went into a coma for a year. I know you're like, wait, what? She's alive, she's fine, she's married, she's healthy, she's got a beautiful family, children, but she went into a coma for a year. Nothing was wrong with her legs, right? So when she woke up, she could not feel her legs because of muscle atrophy. So the muscles had become so weak from lack of use that she could not feel her legs, and so she had to rebuild. She had to uh, angiogenesis. She had to kind of restore through exercise, not only the strength but sensation. So that was a process, and hearing her story about going through that was just insane to me. But that's a short version of a very long story. But muscle weakness can also affect sensitivity. So as you strengthen, you'll feel more. And in the beginning, it might feel like you're flying blind. But if you haven't already, check out the breathing gym class. If you're here, you have access to it, where you press and we want to learn how to manipulate breath energy in the body, because also part of what we're doing is we're promoting blood flow and we're awakening tissues and restoring like function. So we want to feel, because again, in the New York class, this is normal, but like I talk about, what's his, Yeshua, what's his name, I think, but he was like, I'm breathing, like feel breath. A lot of people think that. A lot of people feel that. I think that's very normal. So we can't do the work we're talking about here from a place of not being able to feel. So you have to first awaken, it's why I call it lesson zero, because it's so foundational to be, if you can't even feel the parts of your body, then, and what I mean by that is even without looking in a mirror, you should be able to know, what you're doing. You should be able to feel it without having to look. That's ultimately where we want to be. So that's way more than what you asked for. But anyway, so moving on. That's all number one. Find your point d'appui. You've got to resist. Resisting the outflow of breath means resisting collapse. So the bigger you want the voice to be, or the more richness, fullness you want, the more you will have to resist. But to Stanley's point, there still has to be a balance maintained, and everybody's threshold for how much you can resist while still maintaining some degree of flow is different. Some people have a lighter voice by nature. Some people have like I've talked last time about Ariana Grande and Cynthia, because it's such a big movie right now. Ariana's voice is light. I think she sings very well. It's just a lighter voice. It's not right or wrong. It's just a lighter voice type than Cynthia, who has a thicker, richer voice. Okay, whatever. But Ariana can still belt, but her threshold for bigness. If you saw her sing with Mariah Carey and Jennifer Hudson, Jennifer Hudson's voice is just really big. It's just naturally. She doesn't have to do much for her voice to be big. It just is, And so yeah, some people just have it like that. So you want to respect your voice type and your personal threshold. Now, through the fitness of it all, you can extend what you're capable of, sure, but yeah. Anyway, that's why I have notes, because I'm starting to deviate. Point number two is your vocal cords, sealing the valve. The looser the vocal fold adduction, the breathier the tone, and also the lighter the tone will be. This is really easy. You can try this now because I can't hear you, everybody's muted. If you take a breath and let it come out in an airy tone, don't try to even do anything fancy, just, it's gonna whoosh out. If you do the exact same thing and just with a crisp no H, no H, no H. If you just take a breath, breath control, density, maybe harshness too, yeah, but if we seal the valve, if we make the densest tone we can, taking out any excess breath, then we're going to naturally get a thicker tone. But the skill of that is we want to do techniques that create more glottal compression. So I start you guys off with ha 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 and stuff like that to get that light touch. Do re mi fa sol la ti do. It's beautiful. It's lovely. If I do say so myself, it's not powerful though. So if we want a denser tone, ha 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 ha, we have to feel that firmness. But the reason why I went in the order I went in is that the more your capacity for power hinges foundationally upon your capacity for openness. So, because the more you press your vocal folds together, it increases vocal weight, that propensity of the body to implode. And so, if you want your voice to be bigger, yes, the vocal fold coordination has to change. But what I see a lot of people missing, especially with like Witch's voice, I have a lot of students who, when I mention Witch's voice, they cringe because of teachers who come before them because they think Witch's voice is you make me feel like a natural. Because a lot of people teach like a very throat close. I call it chipmunk voice when I hear men do it. Because when I first started on YouTube, there were all these Seth Riggs people like I can blend. Okay, but like don't nobody want to pay to hear that though, you know what I mean, like, you know, like that's not, you're blended, but at what cost, you know? So the difference is you make me feel, if I'm open, you make me feel, I'm still not going to sing an Aretha Franklin song in that key if I were performing it publicly, but it's a different quality of tone, to my point. There's a fullness there. Or like, okay, so what part of what's making it happen is really there are a few things. There's resonance. There's all this stuff. But the main thing is the thickness of the folds. And so, but the thicker the folds, the more the resistance. And the reason why a lot of people, I think most singers instinctively know that, even if they wouldn't say thickness of the folds per se, they may not use that verbiage, but they have an awareness of that. But when they go for the thickness, the body collapses and then the tone ends up getting thin anyway. You hear this a lot in R&B and pop. You know, I know what a girl. It's almost an aesthetic that component of R&B and pop at this point now. I don't care if he does it. It's like growing up the pop and R&B guys, from Chris Brown to Boyz II Men, and they're beautiful voices. But all over you could hear that the body was imploding, and they could get some big sounds. But again, Wanye, the lead singer of Boyz II Men, polyps. I want to say twice, at least once. You know, they were not getting off scot-free. I'm not going to do my thing where I start listing all the vocal injuries of singers again. But it's like they weren't getting away with it. Because sometimes people will tell me, well, this person did this person, and they didn't have any problems. Like, yes, they did, because they're my student, and they came to me for rehabilitation, you know? And so, like, what are you talking about? You didn't know this, I guess. You don't read. It's often publicized. Like, you know, when Ariana Grande got her hemorrhage in 2015, people are like, how do you know that? It's in Billboard. Like, it's not a secret. I didn't, you know, and so it's not how do you know Sam Smith had to cancel his tour because of a vocal injury? Because he said it on his Instagram. Like, what are you talking about? So it's not, these aren't secrets here. Like, they're not it's just that a lot of people don't think about it, especially if they're not performing so prolifically to where it's even a concern. Because remember, like my friend Randy Bisher, who's a voice scientist who we did a class with like years ago during quarantine, theoretically, because a lot of the studies that we quote about like Witch's voice and stuff, he played a part in it if it wasn't his studies completely. If we could rest every time we got the voice the least bit irritated, we'd be fine, you know. But the problem is, once everybody wants to hear it, once Derek releases his hit single, and everybody wants him, and you got to sing in New York, and then Connecticut, and then in Philly, and then you got to fly over to London. And I have clients who like pause on the bigness thing of it all. Part of the reason why I always bring it back to active support, even though it's work, vocal longevity. When it's done right, I feel like it's essential for getting the healthiest voice. And a lot of times, what's funny, and I'll talk about this in my book, which really does exist, I swear, that I'll release before I'm 92. That I have students who they would say, Eric, I don't need to do all that stuff. I can sound good without that. Until they would do their first tour, and then they would say, hey, so that lat thing, can we go back into that again? Or and I'm also working on interviewing some of my clients for the podcast. You saw me talking to Ben, but I'm going to be talking to some of my professional singer clients and some of whom you will know. And we'll talk about, like, one of them, I don't want to ruin it, but how once he went out there and had to sing on TV, he was like, oh, the only thing that got me through was this. Like, I need to do it. It's more work in a way, but you know what's way more work? having to cancel shows and giving people's money back and disappointing fans and going to the doctor a lot because you've injured your voice in a completely avoidable injury thing. And I hate it when vocal coaches are like, but you're gonna injure. No, no, shut up. Shut up, Steven. If your name is actually Steven, no offense. I'm making this name up. but I hear this a lot. Like, you keep talking about injuries because, I mean, it's helping me buy nice things, but I'd rather help you prevent the injury than you paying me 300 plus an hour to help you recover. I mean, hey, more money for me, I guess, but I insist it does not have to happen in the first place. And I get irritated when vocal coaches are like, injuries are just going to happen no matter what. Maybe to you. If you don't know what to do, then just say that. But like, no, it does not have to happen. If you don't know, that's fine. But no, it doesn't have to happen. So, and I think a big part of what protects you is that conscious support. And yeah, but anyway, I've already linked to it. But it's the thickness of the vocal cords. That was the whole point. That's why I need notes, because I will deviate so much. It's largely the thickness of the chords, but it also, the resonators have something to do with it as well, and we're going to talk about that as number 3. But the thickness of the folds has a lot to do with it, and the degree of compression. So if I do the ha-oh, and I see you, Zoe, I'm going to finish this, because I won't be able to find my way back otherwise. So the ha-oh, for example, ha, ha, that gives us I love her, and that gives like medial compression. It's kind of like a 50-50-ness of like the upper lower qualities of that cricothyroid thyroid function. You know what I mean? But if I do Witch's voice, that's a compression that's very cricothyroid dominant. It's very stretched. You know, you can hear that Earth, Wind, and Fire. Oh, that's very cricothyroid dominant. It's stretchy chords, you know. But if I do try me, that's very thick, and so that's my chords compressing in a fat way. They're all different forms of compression, so that's some of the nuance. The coordination of the folds matter. Are we stretching the folds? Are we fattening the folds? Are we kind of at a halfway point? Of course, there's even more gradients in between. I'm just demonstrating somewhat hyperbolically, as I want to do, just to make the point clear. But there is gray area. You don't have to be all the way here or all the way there. But there are gradients. But you can affect the thickness or the thinness of the folds as you compress. So it's not just about thickness, although thickness will give warmth. Thinness will give piercingness, but you can also be loud if you compress. So, yeah, because we can be, what's the thing I was doing? So you're gonna find me up to the western sky. Okay, but that's not particularly powerful. But if son, you're gonna find me. And so I'm in the same place, but now I'm pressed. You know, there's a pressing there. You know, so the pressing matters. And could I do that thickly? No, because testosterone said no. So no, that's not gonna happen. Are there people who can? Yes, but I am not Avery Wilson. There are people who can do it. Of various genders. I'm not that person. But because the thicker the chords are as you go up, there's more weight. And so here's the thing I want to talk about with the thickness. When you're practicing thicker folds or more compression, because like I said, more compression doesn't have to be thick, but a lot of you who've messaged me, some of you aren't here right now, but when you see this later, a lot of you messaged me about bigness and thickness of the voice based on some of the people you gave me as reference. You really are talking about with like thickness, not just compression, but thick, fat folds. In order to make sure that that's not in what I mentioned as the Alicia Keys thing, you want to make sure you can stay open, because if you're collapsing, it's not safe. So I believe in safety checks, safety. When I had my vocal fold hemorrhage at 19, I was, after all that we've been through, I was singing from that place, and I didn't know what the hell I was doing, and people applauded me. I killed it. And then I killed this. So, and you know, people are like, you're a star. Thank you. I'm a star who can't talk. Yeah, so, and it wasn't fun. And so I prioritized the sound over the feeling. And if I am honest, I knew something wasn't right, but I was really good at overriding, and I actually prided myself on how well I could push through discomfort and pain, and which is why part of why I project my crap onto you guys and constantly preach to you. Please don't do that dumb stuff that I was doing. Like, "Oh, I'm just a strong person. Sure, it hurts, and I hear ringing, and there are always two of you. Like, no, you don't want to. It shouldn't be like that. But I thought that I was like, I'm just so strong. No, it's not wise. And luckily, through luck and youth and good training, I was able to make a full recovery with no lasting damage. But I've had clients that are less lucky. The phonal trauma can result in scarring and all that kind of stuff. So you don't want to just don't. So how do we make sure that you don't? So for a while, I was like, those sounds are evil. Diabolo sin musica. We shall never make these sounds. But it's not that the sounds themselves aren't wrong. I was just performing them wrongly or unhealthily. 'Cause I don't really think I have a wrong sound, but I was producing them in an unhealthy coordination, as was evidenced by the bleeding of it all. So singing shouldn't make you bleed. So you learned that from an expert. Yeah, so anyway, but number one is when you're playing around with any kind of thick fold function or glottal compression, the chord should retain, the larynx should maintain its ability to rock. If you get if you're reaching a ceiling or it's flipping, then that means you're shooting the larynx up and it's not rocking. So glottal compression does not mean pulling all of your chest voice as high as possible. That is not smart. I don't care what your voice type is. 10 out of 10 don't recommend it. So, like I mentioned, Ariana Grande, she's a true light voice type. If anybody could pull her chest voice up, it would be her, but her high notes are almost always full out mixes. Extremely well done mixes, but she's mixing. And there's a lot of head voice in them because she's smart. And that's why she's so consistent. Pulling your chest voice up, who's somebody? Sia. I'm gonna swing! It sounds so great on the recording, but like, live, she was really struggling to get through. So when we're in Witch's voice, well, hold on, let me get to that. So you want to make sure that the voice can blend. So you want to make sure, well, with Witch's voice, the part of it, to answer your question, is already there. Witch's voice kind of pre-tilts the larynx, and so you're already kind of, it inclines you toward blending. It's part of why, I think it's one of the reasons why female gospel singers, like African American gospel singers generally, of course, because there are some ones who are not good, trust me, but generally of the famous ones who are like famous for being really good, your Karen Clark Shears and your Yana Crawleys and like all the different people you can name, with all the Newark and Kiki and everybody who's like really good, they sing with "Tis so sweet to trust in Jesus." They stay in that. They stay in that place and they can squall and push. There's an inherent natural kind of support you get from Witch's voice because it naturally kind of predisposes you toward a healthy coordination. Again, I don't like being trapped, but there are singers, Fantasia Barrino, Patti LaBelle, Erykah Badu, Ari Lennox, Steven Tyler. He's not a gospel singer, but he doesn't, he sings from that place, a lot. He goes into that voice, and so it's a common thing. But when we're in Witch's voice, we're compressing the chords. We're bringing the chords together in a more compressed state, but the chords are stretched and a little bit open, and there's also a tilting of the larynx. So the chords kind of, my fingers won't like do it, but the chords stretch. And the larynx tilts, allowing the chords to stretch more, but we're still pressing the folds. One of the reasons why people think head voice has to be weak is because head voice and head-ear coordinations, even a head-ear mix, naturally stretches the folds, which is going to lighten the voice if we don't do anything to kind of fight it. And it's going to naturally create a bit of an opening between the folds, and so letting more air out. So, which is not automatically bad. But yes, Witch's voice and twang are pretty much the same thing. And some people say laryngeal tilt, but that can mean a lot of things. But I'd say Witch's voice and twang is pretty safe to say those are the same thing. I know in the classical world, sometimes people talk about the French "ah," which is kind of similar as well. It's not exactly the same as what we do in Western music, but there's the and so there's like that kind of I think of one of the things that made Maria Callas so popular is she wouldn't just do, she wouldn't just stay in that place, but and some people found it garish and masculine, and some people found it thrilling. But she would, instead of una voce poco so she would make these kind of French kind of sounds, and so so it's called a lot of different things, which makes vocal training annoying sometimes because there's so many different ways. But it's one of the complaints that I always understand. That's why sometimes I'll try to list the litany of all the things it's called. But I'll also say you can call it Henry for all I care as long as you can do it. So that's at the bottom line. Is if you get the point, as long as we understand what's going on and you can do it, you win. But yeah, so I do think out of all the forms of glottal compression, Witch's voice is like the safest, because when your chords are stretched, it's kind of typically that's not where the injury happens. Injury typically happens in the chest-ear coordinations for most people, and so at like the apex of tension at like chest voice, like where the mix should be happening. So that stretched coordination is very forgiving to the voice, and so but the problem is the reason why that's the reason why so many of the Seth Riggs offshoot people teach like meow 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 meow. But like even for the class that Randy, if you were there, I know some like two of you, but during the quarantine we hosted a workshop with Randy Bisher, and there was a girl who did At Last, and from Etta James, and she's like, "And life is like," and he asked her to meow like a cat. And meow, meow. I immediately understood why she didn't. And I'm sure she was like, "You want me to do this in front of all these people?" A little embarrassing. But he was trying to get her, and love is like a song. He was trying to get her to find that quality to the voice. But the reason why I think it didn't work for her in that moment. And I find that it often doesn't work because people hear, and they think, and they squeeze the whole throat, and so it can be really challenging. And I think that what can really help is first finding your place of openness, so that you're fortified in your openness, and then it still might be a challenge, but finding it. And also, what can help too is as in cat, and staccatoing that. If you kind of do a coup de glock, but with so it kind of naturally inclines you toward that kind of tilted but still kind of thick place. The vowel kind of encourages you to thicken up, but it also encourages tilt. It's kind of a bit of a combo, and so it's like it kind of takes you naturally to the place of witchy compression naturally. Is my point. So I would do that. But to get to the final point, how do you integrate this happens regular singing? Okay, so good question, and we're actually about to get even more into that. But I would start off just working the melody of things. I always use this line. If you don't know the song, you might say, like, "Where is he getting this from?" But and D'Angelo, the R&B soul singer, if you're within a certain age bracket, his video was famous for him being like naked in the video with like a black background, and he's like shiny and naked. It was like, "Oh my God, he's so like," that was the whole thing. But it's actually a really good song. There's a line at the end. He goes, I just wanna be your man. And I love that line when talking about this, because he's going through 3 different coordinations. So he's going through a witch's voice, and then to vomitare, I just wanna be, and then he lets it all go, your man. And he's doing it more subtly than when I'm doing it. I'm making a big spectacle of each moment because I'm teaching it. But I feel like when you've mastered it, or also Eva Cassidy, I would bind up the sorry world. She would move back and forth between like witch's voice, vomitare, releasing. And do I think for 1 second she was thinking, okay, witch's voice, vomitare, I'm a little No, I don't think she was thinking that at all. I don't think great singers really think about it in the moment. So part of my thing with the different forms of glottal compression, be it witch's voice or whatever, I think if you make it a meditation of just kind of and exploring the sounds, I I found this might be a bit of like a nothing burger of an answer, but uh the right tones will find their way to you when they're called for, like when it emotionally makes sense. But if you want more deliberate practice, I would whine or cry through a whole song. You know, shout out to Pressy if you're watching this. One of my other students, we were working on what was it? Dang, it was it's gonna drive me crazy. I can see it, but I can't hear it. Oh, you're no good, heartbreaker. You're lying, you're cheap. I don't know why I'll let you do these things to me. And we're working on trying to keep the in it. And she's doing the Cynthia Erivo version because Cynthia is really good. You know, we've established that. And so we would. So we kind of squeak through, and so we kind of work because you'll also find, I think almost any singer I've ever worked with, I don't know if there's ever been an exception, you'll find that there are places that you can squeak really well, that are squeak-tacular, and then other places it'll suddenly open up and you lose that adduction, and so you're gonna have to strengthen it all. So because she could really do some parts, and other parts were more of a challenge, which is normal. Like we all have that. So we had to. I don't know why. Like, I don't know. I don't know why. So we have to kind of play with like, you just kind of have to get your reps in, so to speak, smartly. Like, don't bludgeon your voice to death, but you want to, would you recommend Witch's voice or staccato? It's like, it's this, I mean, that's like saying, would you like I don't know how you know how to compare it. It's the same thing. It's just different forms of the same thing. So staccato is just, or do you mean staccato like ah?
Yeah, staccato, staccato, staccato.
So staccato like
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's staccato is good. It's gonna be warmer and richer, which is fine, you know. That's so if you want like a richer warmth, you know. When I first saw you, I said, "Oh my, that's my dream." It's gonna be a fuller quality.
The reason why, I said it because when the witch's voice kind of stuck like within your nose area, and I don't.
It does have a nasal quality. So if you do the but again, I don't think you have to. You don't have to set up permanent residence there. You don't have to only sing that way. And also, you can use it. You can use a little. You can suit it to taste. So, an example I use a lot is the twangometer. So, so we can use however much we want, and I feel like what's it? When I go the distance, I'll be right. There's a little bit of when I go it's a little bit in there, I'm not like making it too big, so there can be just enough, like when I go the distance, so we can add just enough to give it some bite and some focus, or we can take it to a place where it's like, you know, we can go crazy, but it's up to you to how much you use, but you don't have to use all of it. I think it's smart for any singer to exercise with it regardless, just for the stretch it gives the folds, and for the freedom it will give you, even if you don't want to literally use that sound as a stylistic device.
How do you exercise it? How do you exercise it?
I'm sorry, what was that?
But how do you exercise it? That's the thing. How do you like go from straight voice into that? I guess you bend you go from to like something like that. I guess yes.
You mean for like exercise, or using it
Yeah,
as
exercise.
You do exactly what you just did, but you just kind of either work it on a scale if you want, or I'll work it through the melody of a song. Yeah. Oh, like, so let's say, when you call me baby, I know I'm not the only one. A little too sweet, so if I want to, when you call me and that might be too much for you. You might want to do less. But my point is, that's an example, a fast forwarded example, and you would just squeak and creep through it to get that. Yeah. Does that make sense?
Okay.
Well, whoops. And I would chop it up. I had kept myself muted. I would chop it up, even if there are notes that you know you want to sustain when singing it. I would try to keep getting those contractions. Um, so, uh, What's the thing? Well, let's just say that when I would when you coming, baby. So if I was practicing it for myself to prepare, I would chop it up just to kind of get the teeth. So all this to say, to put a bow on this, to get to the last part that I want you all to work on with me. Um, when a big part of thickness, fullness of the voice is compression. It takes practice because it is very easy to intend to press your folds and to instead collapse your entire throat. So we want to connect to this in here. We don't want to collapse this whole thing. We want to get to this, boom. We don't want to collapse everything, which is why I do these vocal fold meditations on Patreon that you all have access to. I like to start off, sometimes I'll start off wide open. Well, that's not wide open if you could hear it, but well, the chords aren't touching. So I'll start off partially almost closed, pre-adducted. You can hear the air passing through. If you phonate, you get tone. So we do this, and then we get to the light touch, ha ha ha. Then we get to the firmer touch, And the reason why we do that is, yes, to warm up, yes, to build the strength, but also to build your interoception, proprioception, your ability to feel your vocal cords, because it's really a skill in itself. Once you have it, you've got it forever. Like I feel like it's like it can be like becoming fluent in a language. Like in the beginning, you're like hablo es, like you're hearing it in one language and translating it, but then eventually you're like, de creyente. You just naturally start to do it. You can think in it and you can dream in it, and so once you have it, you'll have it. It won't always be like this, but in the beginning, I call it a meditation because you kind of have to be meditative and ha 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 ha, because the temptation is to because it's hard to feel the vocal folds because they don't really have like proprioceptive nerves. We kind of have to feel the folds through the negative space and through subtle pressure sensations, almost like a dolphin or a bat or something. So you can feel them, just not in the super direct way, because if you could, we'd all be going through this a lot faster if you could. So you can't feel them the way you could like feel your fingers. Like I always say, like, I know I'm giving you the thumbs up. I know I'm doing the peace sign. I know I'm giving you a fist. I can know that because the proprioceptive nerve, I can clearly tell what this is doing in space. I know I'm wiggling my toes. I don't have to look down. I know that's happening. Vocal folds are tricky. Your vocal folds can be moving and you don't know it. Like you can, when you think about making a tone, your vocal folds approximate in readiness for that tone, which is obviously on pitch. Maybe you can, but I don't feel that exactly. Like not acutely, not in the way that I'd be able to like put my finger on. So we have to learn how to feel, and how to get to the center. Like I don't know if some of you have studied with Trina. There's a concept in gyrokinesis and advanced gyrokinesis called the fifth line, and the idea is like you have the front, the back, 1 and 2. Right and left, 3 and 4, but the fifth line is the center, the nucleus, the marrow, like right in the center of it. And so it's that they talk about a lot about fifth line energy, feeling like you're brought up from the fifth line, and then everything else surrounding it. So we want that fifth line quality of like, can we get to the center of this tube? It's more in the front kind of, but can we get to the center and not squeeze the whole thing? Like, can we? And that's why I mentioned in our last class the importance of just asking yourself, can I feel a reflexive response? Because that lets you know that you're on the right track of tapping the chords and not just shutting your whole throat down. And some tones make it easier to feel your chords than others. And that's going to be different from person to person. What works best for Zeta might work differently for Sean. Just find what works best for you. How would you go about practicing Goitar as well? Oh, wait, sorry. Let me go back. I missed one. Uh, yes, there's absolutely an emotional component. That's not even up for debate. We know, for example, that when people are speaking from a place of conviction or certainty without restraint, there's more medial compression. And when people are in a state of fight flight, cord closure weakens. So that's a factual thing. That's not even like a personal opinion thing. So sometimes, and I think probably I would dare say you all have experienced this at some point, because I have students tell me this all the time. Eric, when I'm really in the moment, it just happened. I was doing the thing. And I'm like, yes, I fully believe you. But we can't always, if we want to maintain our sanity, bring ourselves authentically to the full moment of the breakup, of the whatever, or of the whatever. Like in the song, like that's gonna wear you out, like as a human. And so we have to learn how to find it just purely physically. But there is an emotional component where, in general, speaking, singing from a place of certainty or storytelling, or a place of feeling comfortable enough to share, naturally incites the vocal folds to close better, naturally incites the solar plexus to work. And that's why I've referenced this a lot, so many of the muscle tension dysphonia, psychogen dysphonia clients I have, they come from abusive backgrounds. And so when you feel like you don't have a voice, or when you feel like you can't be heard in the world, your body kind of reflects that, So how you use your voice to some extent, and I post a lot from Ruby Rose Fox and Irene Lyon on my social media because they reference this a lot. If you're really dysregulated, it can show up in the voice as voice weakness. This probably could be a series of workshops on its own. It's not even my bailiwick per se, but it definitely. And so that how you feel about your right to be heard, how you feel about your worthiness of taking up space, and um your right to be seen absolutely affects how your voice acts, regardless of all this stuff. You can know this and more, but if you feel in the slightest apologetic for being seen, it will show up in the voice. It will siphon strength. It doesn't mean you have to sound like crap, but it will insidiously siphon away some of that strength. Um, and ironically, I think Bumitade can actually be a good therapy for this. I think this primal sound can help to open things back up. Um, Wait, I just realized, Zoe, did I ever ask you what your question was? I'm sorry, I just kept going. Yeah, please. Yeah. If you even remember at this point, it just hit me. I'm sorry.
It's okay, no worries. I was just writing. I have two questions. I will be quick. The first question is, if you have an exercise for removing excessive tension when you try to sing large intervals. And my second question is, if someone, for example, like me, struggles with excessive tension on the throat and wants to build vocal compression, should we, for example, first remove the excessive tension and then build the vocal compression? Or you mentioned two types of vocal compression, the stretchy ones and the thick, the ones that make the folds thick. Should we first focus on the stretchy ones? Would be safer for the strength.
I would focus on the stretchy ones or the medial ones, like the O is kind of like a middle ground a little bit. It's kind of thick but not too thick. It's like a medium quality. So the it depends a little bit on how much effort you put into it as well. So I can do it gently. Ha, ha, so I can kind of affect how much that is, but I would start there or with squeaky because it's typically easier. Um, I do recommend having a clean slate before doing the glottal compression. So if you already have some issues with tension, I would try to resolve that as much as possible first. I mean, we can never be perfect or whatever, but there are a lot of things I would do. I like the Carl Style. For me, the Carl Style work was really helpful. A lot of manual stuff like pulling my tongue, massage helped in vocalizing. Like I had to do a lot of severe pulling back where I was just like, just kind of, yeah, even in the midst of me performing full time at one point. Because I remember a show I did where I was like literally pulling my tongue backstage and then went out and did what I did. But yeah, I would, and I'm gonna do a how I learned to sing video on this. But I talk about how I taught a workshop in Los Angeles with Andre Alexander, who's a Grammy-winning uh, producer, and it was a great workshop, and he was hosting a what do you call it, like a jam session thing afterward, and he was like, "Oh man, you don't want to come to this. Like they're gonna be really singing," and I was like, "Oh, this is like in 2009 or something." And so years ago, and to be fair, at the time, I would sing like this all the time. Oh, so I was known for like pretty smooth singing. And when I went to the event, they were like, yeah! They were like really wailing and singing. And when I got back to my hotel room, I was like, I can, I can do that. And I tried it a couple times and it hurt. And I was like, okay, I've got work to do. I've got work to do. And it was the beginning of me learning how to do compression in a more reliable way. Because this was also after my vocal fold hemorrhage. So I was aware enough to know that, like, okay, I'm still doing whatever caused the hemorrhage. 'Cause I feel really, it doesn't feel comfortable. But one of the best things you can do, and we're going to get into this as well, also for the bigger intervals, is learning how to really trust fall into the space that you're creating. And we're about to work on that in a second. But that has everything to do with creating the safety. So I find that people will open up but then close. And so some of the Patreon followers have said, so you're saying I can be open and still tighten my throat? Yes, that is 100% what I'm saying. I'm saying that exactly that you can feel your body and still connect here. So to get to this point real quick, because I want to get you guys started with this as I even go into the other stuff, I'll give you this very simple exercise. Well, simple to understand. Give yourself, be patient with yourself with doing it. But low and comfortable. I'm gonna open up. It's one of the first things I did with Jeannie Diva years ago when For Real Talent sent me to her. Because what I did was sang it. Yeah, no. And so I was even when she successfully taught me how to open, it's where I developed the concept of trust falling. Now, this is a Eric interpretation of the concept, not hers, but she would say, sing into your ribs, sing into the space. Or in the words of Jean the Rest, the famous opera singer, he would say, imagine that your ribcage is a great church bell and all the sonority is round the rim. And so the idea of singing into the space of tension, into the point of tension, is the nonsensical witchcraft I'm always talking about. But one thing I would kind of rib some of my voice scientist friends about, you've heard me say this a billion times, they were so focused on the literal visible truth that they could never actually sing or speak healthily. Because yes, we know where the vocal folds are and where the vocal tract is, but if you focus up there, it's probably not gonna work out too well. If instead, if I do this scale, or, sorry, the keyboard on my phone cut off. If I'm open, no, I have to let go and let my tone drop into that space. But if I'm open here and then I brace here, I'm not letting it do its job. So I have to fall back and trust that it will catch me. And you don't have to literally fall backwards, but I have to trust it. So I can't, and students laugh when I talk about this, but when I teach one-on-ones all the time, what, that's just my voice, what? That's not gonna do it. We have to have a part of our practice where we learn how to really trust. And actually, let's do a little bit together. Let's do this first one. And if go the octave if you need to, we're gonna move around, don't worry. But, so if I open up, it's big not because I'm trying to make it big, but because I'm not trying to inhibit it. I'm opening up and I'm trying to let myself feel this. I call it primal resonance sometimes. So yes, we have resonators up here. That's also a factual thing. But if we think about feeling this cavernous space we're creating, or if you're using a different point, if you think of trying to feel that point, you can almost, some of you have told me you felt this, you could literally feel the sound waves in that part of your body. Try to fill that chamber with the tone. and that's going to be a different experience. Also, we go here. So this those are the notes. But what am I learning? Like, so some of you will practice for hours, but you'll so what your body is learning is not the notes you hit, but the coordination with which you hit them, which is So if I let go, and I love a one note practice. I want you to observe this. I have to let go, and it's gonna feel like letting go of the steering wheel as you're driving. It can kind of be triggering in that way, but you have to I can't and I do all my little. I encourage you to, do all the weirdo things I do too, but just to try to make sure that I'm not falling into the trap of it does. This is not the time to be all like, you want to try to relinquish a little bit. I'm not saying to never sing with control again, but I want you to just learn the trustworthy nature of the support in your body. And I keep gesturing to my lats, but again, with whatever you choose to use, let it make your body prove its value. Because what happens is some of you get frustrated because you think you're doing the thing, but you're only impersonating the thing. And so you're open in a way, in a superficial way, but you're not really letting it open you throughout. So there should be kind of a subsequent like internal openness that you can feel all through, and it should feel really secure, though you never knew you were my reason, though you never knew you were still open ribs. I can squeeze if I want to squeeze, though you never knew. I have to make the choice to trust this. Though you never knew you were mine, I have to let it help me. So there has to be a conscious effort. We have to let go of the fantasy that the exercises are so magical that they'll work even if you're mindless. The magic is you. The magic is your conscious awareness. You have to show up and let it work. So you have to be there. Because sometimes when you guys will say, I want to let go, and you really mean you want to dissociate. So I need you to inhabit your body and not clock out. So let go in the sense that you're expressing yourself freely, but don't let go as in you stop being aware of what's happening. Also, because this has been asked by people before, am I literally thinking on stage, though you never knew you, ribs, 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 ribs? No, eventually, when you do it enough times, it does start to just feel organic to do it. But there is a peripheral awareness of that it's happening, but it feels like help. It doesn't feel like a rule I'm following. Like if I were to let my ribs drop, and though you don't believe, that would just feel uncomfortable. So it's not like, oh, I'm not being a good vocal student or something. It's like, oh, that is inhibited, So, and though you don't believe that they do, I want to feel the freedom. So I'm going to instinctively go toward the freedom, If I drink water, it's not because I'm trying to be a good person. That's like I'm thirsty, So I want you to feel the help of it, So let me just get to this because I'm ranting again. Okay, so vomitare. I think vomitare is incredibly important for the voice. In recent years, I've become increasingly convinced that it's an important way to practice regardless of how you choose to sing. I have students who sing really lightly, stylistically, and we still do vomitare because I just think it helps you get your overall strength. Doing a few like heavy lifts, like in the gym, some fitness gurus say like lift heavy just for your the health of your bones and muscle, even if you don't really want to be like a bodybuilder or something. So I think it's like lifting heavy. So I do think it's good for us. I really believe two things with vomitare. One, 3 minutes is the magical time frame in the beginning. I would like set your phone, set a timer, set your watch, whatever, for 3 minutes, and just check in. Because after you do it, if things feel a little wonky, take a break. Don't beat yourself up. Just like, okay, I kind of got a little irritated because vomitare is the heaviest, thickest sound that I teach. If you're on my Instagram, you saw I just posted this guy who can sing like 15 tones at once or whatever. And so there are definitely crazier things the voice is capable of doing. But as far as what I teach, it's kind of as thick and heavy as we get. And so because of that heaviness and because of the skill required, it's okay if you kind of mess up at first. Just don't keep abusing your voice. So if you notice you're irritated, then take a break and come back either hours later or the next day. So that's one thing, start small. But the other thing is, vomitare, just like witch's voice, can be done to different degrees. So this is vomitare, and also this is vomitare, So you don't have to go to that extreme where you're also like vibrating your arytenoid cartilages. You can keep it more to the interarytenoid muscles and keep it clean. So I would start off kind of gentle. It's like, I think of it as a groan grunt, or sometimes I'll say witch's voice is like a baby cry, and vomitare is like a grown man cry. But like, and, since my baby left me, it's like that. I think like blues, like But it doesn't have to be super soulful. It could just be and notice I keep sirening. I think it's very important with vomitare that you check your ability to blend. If you can't get to head voice, you are in the danger zone. Even if you sound amazing, even if I was like, Hunter, you're amazing. It might sound amazing, but if we want to keep it sounding amazing, we need to make sure that you can blend into head voice from it. And so 3-minute intervals to start, check in. And if you feel amazing, then do more, sure. But just check in to make sure that you're not hurting yourself. And you can affect how much weight. You can manage the effort. So vomitare doesn't have to be the strongest thing ever to start. And also, don't be thrown off by the term vomitare, because I know it's you think whoo, but vomitare or grunting, groaning, whatever word you want to think of, or just glottal compression. Some people just refer to it as that. It starts at the vocal folds, which sounds like sacrilege or whatever, but it does. It starts in the body response. I like to do a few that are purely reflexive, just to prove to myself, and by that I mean I'm not flexing my lats preemptively. I'm just like, I'm normal. I'm not doing anything fancy. I'm just starting here. If my solar plexus doesn't respond, then I know that I'm closing my entire throat. Because if I go, then I'm going to implode. But if I close it right, and what's funny is, if you're wondering, yes, friends, family, loved ones, everyone has made fun of me for hearing me practice this. But when I'm doing my practices, I will, and I have no shame now. So if I'm visiting family, if I'm staying at my parents' house, if I'm visiting them in Houston, I will literally be doing this. I don't care. Like, I'm not going to interrupt the conversation, but I mean, it's if my dad walks back past the bedroom, like, are you okay? Yeah, I am dead. Stop busting my chops. Yes, anyway.
Do you think that slides are like, if I'm practicing vomitare, I only need to do slides. I don't need to do like a staccato version of it like you do at a lot of your other exercises with compression?
I think both can be good. I like to do the staccato version because it helps you affect your onset. Because I think the onset is like the hardest part of it, to be honest. Like, initiating it is the hardest part. But slides are, to me, where you prove that you're in a healthy coordination. So I would use both. But which one you choose to focus on, that's up to you, depending on where you're at right now, and only you can know that. And you can change it up from day to day, whatever. And eventually, like I said with Sean, you can what's the thing I just did? But since my baby left me, I have a new place to dwell. So I would just play with, like, to me, the first step is always, can I just keep it going? I think, ironically, with vomitare, the thing I encounter the most is not that people strain, but it's that people let go. So if you, I find that people let go a lot, sometimes because of fear, which is understandable, because you could hurt yourself, but sometimes they just can't hold on to the pressure. If you've worked with me one-on-one, you've heard me say this a billion times. Almost, I can't tell you the last time I saw somebody straining with vomitare. I almost see people just let go too fast, because they're like, because it's a lot. Again, I get that. I think it can help to practice, like, doing a little diving with your singing, going closer toward the bottom if you are at that level, and practice maintaining the pressure. Just get used to that heightened pressure sensation, because that's another component of this. We're open. We have to open harder here, close more firmly here, and as a result, there is a heightened feeling of pressure within the body. And that can be alarming if you're not used to it. So there are ways, I can't remember if it was Stanley or somebody who mentioned about like the doing too much. We need ways to check for balance. Straw in a cup of water is one way to make sure you're not going too far. The other way is, these are also ways that I would approach doing big intervals, Zoe, so that you can see, just to check for safety's sake, because even if you sound amazing, but it doesn't feel amazing, check with the, let's say it was, oh! Let's say it was that, just I'm pulling it randomly. Oops, bubbles went crazy. I know or you want something that's going to give you some kind of indication of the quality of your flow. And I think trills and bubbles can be really helpful. Also, if you're collapsing, then there you go. So if you're collapsing, then you know you're not going to be at your best, because it's just that space. If you're trying to sing big, wait, hold on. I'm going to get to these because how do you know when you go too far and stop playing? Okay, so to me, one is pain. So if you feel pain, if something hurts, then that means stop. You've gone too far. But the other thing is delayed onset. So if I becomes high, if you get a puff of breath before the tone comes out, you've gone a little too far. And also if you're getting huskiness that you didn't have before, didn't want. So you should be able to but if you're getting if you're getting airiness coming in that you don't want, that's a sign that you've gone too far. And or if you know that you can typically blend well and now you can't, because that's typically a sign that you've gotten just really tight. Again, none of these are cause for panic. It just means, okay, went a little too far. Because vocal injury typically doesn't just happen after one acute moment of you going too far or one practice. It's typically from you constantly just going and ignoring it and pushing through. Because I know for me, with my nodules and with my hemorrhage when I was a teenager, I just, in retrospect, my body was begging for mercy, and I just kept pushing through because it was just very unwise. So yeah, but if you can recognize that, then and here's the other cool thing. You're not powerless. If you stop and you notice, ow, discomfort, or ooh, lingering tightness or throbbing in my neck, or sudden dysphonia that I didn't have before, yawning is so restorative. Singing through straws. If you don't have straws, sing through pursed lips. Feel the pressure build up. That helps. Actually, those are the best. Yawning and straw phonation are really good. Or you can ooh into this, but make it easy, just to kind of cool things down. Yeah, but straw phonation and yawning are very helpful for just kind of restoring that lost space, because chances are you wouldn't have like an injury in such a short amount of time, like one performance gone wrong or one practice session gone too far. But you will get tightness that can present with symptoms of vocal injury. I've heard people say that singing is crying on pitch. Yeah, I think it's a bit reductive because it's not always that, but I've had classical teachers talk about singing is crying on pitch, because it's one of the things that I didn't like about European classical singing, because there's so much emphasis on like the consistency of the tone, and I felt that sometimes made the emotional impact very contrived, because people aren't that consistent. Like when you're crying, you shouldn't be like, why are you so damn strong right now? Like, aren't you like you? So, but I do think that sometimes it is. Sometimes you are crying on pitch, and I do get that. And the cry, I would say the crying is witch's voice is twang. It can be, but like I said, there's different kinds of crying, because there's the infant baby cry, and then there's like adult cry, which are different kinds of cry. But generally that cry that yeah, it's a cry. It's a cry. So it's always and I stand there with the west. It's that, and pretend it wasn't flat at the top, but it's sometimes you don't win. So yeah, but the point is, it's always a cry. So So sing, feeling, and think on the body. Yeah, if that helps. But I will say, again, to back to Sean's thing, in order to really feel free and implementing this in your actual singing, I do think some of you won't get this. I get it. Some of you are young, but you got to wax on, wax off. You know, so it's a lot of like wax on, wax off, wax on, wax off, and then eventually, like, oh, I'm fighting. What? Oh my God, I have the power. You know, so in the beginning, you have to really, ha 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 ha, ha. And it's boring. It's the boring. Joyce DiDonato, who's I love her. She's a really good mezzo soprano. She talks about like you have to do the boring pedantic work first, and the and then so she's not afraid to, I like her because she's not afraid to like muddy it up because she can do the perfectly resonant rounded thing, but when she actually performs, she's not afraid to like bend the rules a little bit and let some tones be a little less supported and stuff like that. If that makes sense for the character, you know. And so that makes sense. But anyway, I have another lesson that I'm late for right now because that's my life. But but this was a pleasure, guys. I'm gonna post this up later, and Sean, I'm gonna yeah. If you can though, when I post it, if you can remember or jot down the question when I post the recording, feel free to. Oh, there you are. Feel free to post the question there, and I'll try to do a video answer for it to connect to this. But anyway, you guys have a great rest of your weekend. It was great as always. I'll see y'all later.